soft power is an expression of their identity. It's not only how they want to portray themselves, but how they are perceived around the world. That whatever reconciliation or middle ground there is between how you want to be seen and how you are seen is probably a good working definition of soft power. And it matters a lot because we have 200 countries in the world. It's intensely competitive in terms of where people want to travel, where they want to study, who they want to trade and do business with, all of those things. And so soft power is really in the mix as one of the key things that shapes a national identity. Well, I think we actually have been in a phase of hyper-globalization. The world remains very globalized. It's really a shift or maybe a mild reduction from this incredibly intense baseline that has people worried about fragmentation. The truth is that globalization remains incredibly resilient by almost any conceivable measure. One of the things I remind people is that if you're pessimistic about globalization, it probably means that you yourself, meaning your country or your company or you as an individual, are just outside of those flows that are actually thriving and expanding and redirecting all the time. So yes, you can have fragmentation and globalization occurring simultaneously. You can have fragmentation in categories of goods like industrials or energy, but you can have hyper-globalization accelerating and amplifying in technology, software, and social media. In fact, that's exactly what's happening right now. Well, let's remember that we never really had global free trade, right? China pursued industrial policy and tariffs and subsidies, mercantilism for decades. Maybe before Asian countries were part of the trading system, you could say that trade was free, but then it wasn't global because it only became global when it included all the countries in the world. Now that you have all the countries in the world participating, that coincides with trade no longer being so free. So did you ever really have global free trade is something we should ask ourselves. What you have now is countries optimizing, calibrating, seeking to make the most or get the most out of the global trading system or their particular relationships. And quite frankly, that is okay. Because if countries didn't have certain industrial policies, subsidies, ways that would guarantee that their own people benefit, they wouldn't support globalization and global free trade in the first place. So what we're really looking for is some kind of happy medium, some kind of moderation. There isn't going to be one answer to that. There's an American answer where they'll say, okay, we are satisfied now. We are buying more of our own steel. We're making more of our own cars and appliances and so on and so forth. For other countries, there'll be a different answer. It is, we are creating enough jobs. We are diversifying sufficiently, right? We're bringing in skills and technology. So again, it will never settle into one final position. It will always be evolving. And I think that's part of what globalization is a perpetual negotiation. They're thinking about the Western economy. They're thinking about their own very slow growth economies. The fact is that if you do treat the world as a totality, or one human civilization with many component nations and economies, Asia is matter-of-factly the preponderant share of the entire global system. Again, economically in terms of GDP, in terms of trade and demographics, and all of the momentum is with Asia as well. All of the world's fastest growing economies are in Asia. So I don't think it's really subject to debate. The only question is, again, are you part of the trade webs and relationships that emerge from or that connect to Asia? If you're not, you're bound to feel like you're cut off or that you are losing ground because you have. And this is not about kind of Asian triumphalism, right? This is just a statement of fact. And it doesn't mean that it is zero-sum by any means, right? Because globalization, almost by definition, is supposed to be a tide that lifts all boats. So if you really believe strongly in global trade, in free trade, in globalization, and in aggregate prosperity, then you should just want to be more connected to what's happening in Asia. Well, the broader Arab world, from Morocco through to Syria and Iraq, or what people may call the greater Middle East in general, that includes even Turkey and Iran, for example, this whole swath The stable node at the hub of all of this is, of course, the Gulf countries, the GCC economies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and so forth. And they play a very important role. They punch above their weight, so to speak. They're critical in global commodities markets. They're geographically so central as a crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And they are diversifying their economies and attracting knowledge workers and talent and so on and so forth. So I do think that they can play a stabilizing role in their region and beyond. And that is what they're doing at the moment. And I hope that they can continue to expand their role, most of all for the benefit of the 450 million people of that region. And then I think that that would actually wind up reducing friction and increasing flows between these great continents and regions that are really driving the future. What Africa needs to do for Africa is to bring down internal borders, to harmonize its trade laws, to have more free mobility of people and capital, to invest more in infrastructure and primary sector commodities, agriculture, minerals, to do all of those things effectively, efficiently, non-corrupt, with savings and investment redirected towards social and other infrastructure. That's the laundry list, 1 through 50. Right? And none of those things are necessarily contingent on global trade dynamics. Some of them are, of course. Africa is dependent on exports, but what Africa exports is necessary. So it's more about getting those things right, and if Africa does those things, then it will be a more important player and pillar of the future world economy. Well, benchmarking is very important because individuals and countries are inherently competitive, right? And they need to be motivated. And so seeing their neighbors, their rivals, their icons, their role models perform well, not only motivates them to want to do better, but it makes them sort of look under the hood and see, well, what are the specific indicators and metrics? Where am I weaker than the other? What can I do better? And most importantly, they serve as a learning network. So whether it's an event or whether it's an index itself, the knowledge generated and consolidated in these indices ripples outward, and it teaches countries, their leaders, their policymakers, their technocrats, what they can do better. So I think, generally speaking, I'm very in favor of these kinds of benchmarks because they really do promote, let's say, best practices.